Hey, this episode we're going to make a custom fender. Welcome to Urban Monk TV. Now that we've narrowed the fork brace, it's going to fit loosely in here, and the old mount bolts, are not going to work. The other thing is, because the radius of the front wheel on the 83 GS750 is smaller than the radius on the 78 550 that I have, if I put this whole thing on as it is, which I don't want to do because it's just too big, but it would end up hitting on the front end. So I just want a short portion of this, which is all I ever wanted. And I'd like to see if I can use just kind of a cutout up in here that I mount to the top, and it really only comes out to about here. And it's really just an aesthetic thing. I'm thinking if I have the fork brace on in there, if I just came out to about here, it's really as far as I need to go, then I'd have a nice line to the tip. It's right at the top of the wheel. Enough paintable surface to tie in the cosmetic look of the white tank and the green stripes, and then just match that distance back, I believe, and have it equidistant from the center of the center line on the forks, if that makes sense. So I think the first thing to do is just get this thing mounted in here. Located in a spot where about the only way you can get at it is with a open end wrench like this. So this thing end to end is about 6 1/4. I just need to find the middle point, which isn't that difficult. Three 1/8-ish, something like that. And now I'll measure up here. The only thing is it's a curved surface, so I don't know that math is going to help me much here. And I can bend this. I think I want to go roughly 7 inches in each direction, which will get me right to the top line here. So 14 inches long, and then width-wise, I want to get on top of this thing. I want to be about 4 3/4 of an inch. So 14 inches long. Four 3/4 width. Now, maybe a couple different ways a guy could find the center line here. You could measure off of these find the center here and here and then bring a line up over. But this used to have a little peg of molded plastic in it. I don't know if you can see that. That is centered, as far as I can tell, centered enough. So I'm just going to measure off of that peg, 7 and 7, make a line, and we'll work from there. Trying to bend my measuring tape a little bit to have the contour. So there's a couple rough marks that I'm guessing if I did a straight line between them, I'm about 14. Yeah, close enough. A little longer than that with the radius. But again, you know, how critical is this? Not much. It's completely cosmetic. So, my thinking here is that this is the absolute tip of, you know, the new Fender, which would be here and narrow, 4.5, or what did I say, 4 3/4 wide, and then just, you know, it'll be rounded, so the tip will be where the line is, roughly. So I need some kind of a template for that, and you know, here's a nice template. Here's a nice template. This is actually more round. So I think what I'll do is I'm just going to roughly cut these ends off and save them for their line, maybe just this front one. And you know, I won't go right to the line, maybe a little bit from it, because like putting salt in a soup, you know, you can always remove material, but you can't easily put material back on. A little too much pressure. So 3 pieces now. Between the 2 of these, I'm kind of liking this more rounded radius to that. So I think I'm going to use that as a template. So to put this onto here, I think the easiest thing, because I can't see my line here, is to flip it over and just put this inside. And that seems like about the center from here to here with that pin. It'd be nice if this was clean. I think I just ruined this marker. Well, I can see the line. And I can do the same thing back here. Okay, we're starting to see it.
Okay, so I've got this roughly cut out here. Obviously I'm not finished. And not finished there. Got pretty tight to my line up there. Got these big pieces off. One thing I will mention, I was using an abrasive like cutting wheel disc, and I broke a couple of them before I realized, you know, I have this little saw blade one that this was working better. So if you have one of these, I guess that's the preferred tool. You could also do this with a jigsaw, and frankly, maybe even a big 5 1/4 inch circular saw. I don't know. Anyways, cut it. And now I gotta think about the width here. So I wanted 4 3/4 wide from the center. I need to make a line. Okay, a lot of cutting, a lot of plastic sawdust, and getting close. Very rough yet, clearly, but I think I've kept a reasonably good center line here. I'm at a point where I want to start sanding rather than cutting and remove material, but we're close. I need to make some more measurements now and just make sure our distance here is equal. I think I'm going to get a tape measure that is, how do I want to do this? I still want 4 3/4 here, or it just won't fit. And then clearly that's not rounded right. Starting to think the right tool for this job is a belt sander, which I don't own. Might be a good excuse to go buy one. But just throwing it on there rough, it's starting to look pretty good. I wanted the front to end pretty much right there, straight over the axle. It does. I mean, I can reposition this a little bit. I've got some wiggle room there. It's still, I don't know. Actually, I don't have to worry about the width so much now. It's flexible enough to where when I bolt it down to the fork brace, that's going to hold. And clearly I've got clearance, and I think that's working. It just needs to be smoothed up, polished up. So as I do a little fine-tuning work here, I've taken my template and placed it down on top, and I'm just finding the spots where I need to shave it down and marking them off, maybe just the slightest bit here. Yeah, and then I can do the same here. This one's actually pretty good. I don't need to do anything there. That's nice. Just smooth it out. I decided against the belt sander for now because this works really well. Okay. Looking pretty good. Starting to think that might be my front. It's better. And then I just got to sand and smooth out the edges. I'll spare you guys all that boring detail. So now I'm kind of eyeballing it and, you know, putting it down against a somewhat uniform background surface so I can see lines better. It's not perfect, but you know, this is one way I'm looking at it. This is another way I'm looking at it. You know, you can see it isn't perfect, but we're getting close. And at some point, a guy just has to call it quits. It looks pretty good. Maybe a little bit more here and I'll be done. So the next thing I need to do now is just get rid of this little tab that fit into the fork brace to center it originally,
but when I cut the fork brace and eliminated that hole, now this, you know, is not going to serve a purpose anymore. In fact, it's an interference. So I'm just going to use a Dremel and sand it down. Bye-bye. All gone. Let's get the fork brace off the bike and figure out how we're going to connect the two pieces.
Actually, before I remove the fork brace, I want to make some lines as to where I want this thing, because once I get it over on the bench, I want it to go exactly like this when I put it together as one unit, which is how it's going to happen. So I'm not worrying about putting lines on the fork brace right now because it's just primed. I haven't painted it yet. And then I think just so that I know front to back, I'll put a line here and here, and then I'll just match them up. There. Okay, so I've got the brace off, put it in my vise. I've got my lines so that I know how far forward and back I go, and I know how far I go here. So the next thing I really need to do is, I mean, there's two ways you could attack this. You could try to just hold this thing in place and just start drilling all the way through the plastic fender and all the way through the metal. And hope that you don't get things shifted while you're doing that. I don't think I trust myself in that regard, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill holes here first, then mark them from the underside into this to match. So just need to get some equidistant mounting areas, mounting holes marked off here. And I don't think there has to be any real science to this other than get them the same, but not dead on.
So 4 mount holes, relatively centered, you know, in each of these areas. Sorry, that's not marker, I cut myself.
If you don't know what I'm doing, put this thing back together. I'm just getting a little center point for drilling, otherwise your drill can travel off on you. It's a good practice. I think it's called an auto punch. I don't really get into tool names so much, I just know what they are and how I like to use them.
And so for mounting the fender, I got 4, this is 2 of them, I got another package, 4 of these Phillips round head short 12mm bolts. They're 6mm by 1 thread pitch. I've got matching washers and nuts, and my thinking is that these could be up underneath the fork brace, and there's enough clearance in there for that head where that's not going to interfere with the tire. And then the, I don't know, I got to think about this, because actually that's a little bit more attractive if that was showing up top rather than a nut and a washer on the top side. But then I have to cut these down so that they don't interfere with the tire.
But regardless, I need a drill I need a hole drilled that'll fit a 6mm bolt. And for me, that's gonna be a what is this thing? 17/64 of an inch. Gotta love SAE. Of course, I don't go to that size immediately. Start with something smaller. Work my way up. Okay, I do know what those are called. Pilot holes. And then I just step it up a size. And my final hole size. So 4 drill bits in total. Could be argued I might want to put some oil on these, but nah. It's not that thick. Alright, now let's just double check my my bolt fits in there. Yeah, they fit nicely. So that was my original thought, but then I was thinking, I don't know. Because then what that's going to mean is the top will be a nut. And frankly, there's probably enough clearance under here. You know what I'm going to do? Let's put this back on the bike and just check the clearance.
So the first thing to consider here is that I've got that much thickness. I want that focus. There we go. I've got that much thickness I'm going to take up, plus the thickness of the fork brace itself, and leave room for the nut. There's probably not going to be a whole lot of thread sticking toward the tire as it is. I'm just liking that as the top better than a nut. I don't know, you guys let me know if you disagree.
So one thought I'm having already is I decided to put lock washers on here because I don't want these nuts coming loose and getting pinned between the wheel and getting pinned between the tire and the fork brace, you know, which is kind of obvious, but they also then bring the nut closer to the wheel and give me less to shave off here if I go this route. I may have to go with nuts up. The other idea I have is get rid of the lock washers and weld the nuts to the fork brace in place, and you know, maybe that's the way to go, because then you don't have that extra clearance. But let me just see if this fits on the bike. Okay, so I jacked the bike up a little bit so that it's loose in the chock here, and
I can spin the wheel. I'm just trying to see what I'm interfering on. Something. Yeah, I can feel it's grinding on the tire. So that's not going to work. While I was doing this, I had an alternative idea. So my concern is the cosmetics on the top, and the other concern is the obvious one, which is safety. This isn't working, so the obvious thing is to reverse these screws and have the head, the Phillips head down below where there's plenty of clearance for those. And then, you know, but then the question was, those nuts are going to be ugly. Well, why don't I get a chrome cap nut? And similar to like what's on the shocks. And then, for safety, you know, what's to keep that from loosening up over time and dropping that bolt into my tire? Well, you can get chrome cap lock nuts. And so that's what I'm going to do. I got to go to the hardware store and get some 6mm chrome cap lock nuts. Here's what I ended up going with. Chrome, what do you want to call those? Acorn nuts or cap nuts. They also had stainless steel, but they didn't have this nice point to them. These chrome were slightly shinier than the stainless steel. Neither of them had a lock nut option, so I am going to have to keep the lock washers, but that's fine. Now I think I've got something that's kind of decorative on the top visible side, so that's what I'm going to go with. The other option, I was talking to my dad on the phone and he mentioned pop rivet. You know, I guess that's something I could have done. I think this is a little bit more, well, bling, let's call it, but that one's not very shiny. See if I can polish that one up. You know, to each his own. You could also do a pop rivet solution. So the next thing to do here is just to get this sanded and smooth. There's a couple of little indents because there was a design feature to this. There's a couple of black lines. These are actually indented. I may put some body filler in there after I sand, and then just get the bottom cleaned up, and I can put some primer on this thing. And now this thing is complete, so I can put some color on that. Usual 3 coats. So I've sanded it and washed it. What I'm concerned with now is the smoothness, not obviously of these holes, but there was a graphic here and this is indented. I don't know if you can see that. So I want that to be smooth, and then there's the same thing on the other side. And then for some reason this is not smooth here, so just a little body filler. Now I'll just let that set up for a few minutes and try to sand it some while it's still on the softer side. Okay, it's ready for primer. I need to dust it. Wait, little high spot here. Never mind, back to sanding. Yeah, that's good. your eyes trick you, so it's all about feel pretty much at this point. This is high too.
Hey, that's going to do it for this episode. So we've cut it, it's the right shape, we have a way to fasten it, we have a fork brace to connect it to. You know, mechanically and parts wise, the entire custom front fender is complete, and the only thing that remains is painting. You've seen me do a lot of painting in my other videos. If you haven't, go back. I'm not going to put you through the whole painting process again. But the next step with this fender is wash it so it's perfectly clean, and then prime it 3 coats, then let that dry for over 48 hours. Then I'm going to put on 3 coats of color, and in this case I have to put the stripes on, so another 48 hours for that first color, then the stripes, another 48 hours for those to dry, and then clear coat over the whole thing. And that'll be done after 48 hours, and then we can sand it and polish it and finally wax it, and it'll look as good as our gas tank. So there's that. If you want to see how to paint the fender, go back to painting the gas tank, same process, and there's several videos there. So if you like what I'm doing, give me a thumbs up, and put your questions and comments below. I love interacting with you guys, and plus it helps the community. Some of the ideas that you have, you guys come up with better ideas than I have sometimes. It's great, and it's all helpful. I don't pretend that my way is the only way to do this stuff. And then if you want to become a monk, subscribe. Thanks for watching.